Hi guys, in this video I want to talk about bass traps. Since I recently built a whole bunch of them for my recording room here, what exactly are they for and why did I build them? And what are they? Okay, let's start with what are they. They are basically frames of wood surrounding an absorbative material covered with some kind of, should be an acoustically transparent cloth, but what I used was t-shirts, which I'm pretty sure is not completely acoustically transparent, but it looks cool. So, and that's really part of it. I mean, it's a compromise between form and functionality. They need to look good, while also doing what they're meant to do. Acoustic absorption, you can't just put up any old foam. What I used and what they recommend you use is Rockwool RW3, which is a very dense, rigid type of insulating material. There's also Owens Corning's fiberglass. I can't remember the number, but if you look it up online you'll find it easily enough. There's also commercially available foam that companies make with similar properties, but I mean, Rockwool is very cheap and does as good a job. The effectiveness of it is dependent on the thickness of the foam and of course the placement. So the thickness I chose was the thickest you could buy without doubling up, which was 100 millimeters. Then the effectiveness can be further improved by mounting it slightly away from the wall. And by effectiveness I mean really its ability to absorb lower frequencies. And they're called bass traps, but really it's broadband absorbers is a better descriptor because they absorb not just bass frequencies. In fact, they don't absorb the lowest bass frequencies all that well even. It's more low mids to highs. And even then they don't absorb high frequencies that fantastically. But in conjunction with acoustic foam like I have behind me here, they do tame the room modes. What is room mode? A room mode is a frequency within the room which the characteristics of the walls tends to amplify, and then when you're trying to record or monitor, that tone, that frequency range will be boosted and it will give you a false idea of the sound of the song or the recording. So if you mix in a room which is not treated, you will not get an accurate representation of what that song will sound like in other situations. Now, you'll never get a completely accurate representation because people listen in all kinds of situations, like cars or earphones or just off of a phone speaker, which is never going to sound like what you have in a fully treated room with good speakers. But the aim is to create as good a situation as possible while never being perfect, because you cannot achieve perfection. So when you're treating a room, ideally you start with the corners like I have there, although that's not an ideal setup, but again, form versus functionality. In the corners, noise can be amplified by up to 6 dBs. So you want to start there and eliminate the room modes in there. The bass frequencies build up in the corners, so you put the bass traps there and instantly your room becomes nicer sounding. Next, you want to go for flat walls, like this one to the side of my listening position. If that was untreated, and as well the opposite wall is also treated. But if your two listening positions are untreated, then instantly when you're monitoring in your mixing position, you're going to not get an accurate representation of how the song sounds. The next step would be to have the back walls done in the corners and then any flat surfaces. And then add a mixture of foam and some diffusers, which I'm currently building. Ideally, the broadband absorbers or bass traps should be from the ceiling to the roof, or as much of it as possible. So what I have is over 3/4 of the wall from the floor to the ceiling covered, as long as it's definitely at your ear height standing and sitting, then that's ideal. Ideally as well, you would try to put one on the ceiling above you, above the listening position, but that is a hassle with mounting it to the ceiling safely and securely. So for the moment, I'm not going to be doing that. It's one of those things really where people, when they're building a studio, they don't really see it as that important, or not as important as the gear they use. So they buy a ton of really expensive gear for the studio, but then the gear sounds terrible when they're recording because the room is not treated. The acoustic treatment should really be one of the highest priorities of a recording room, because without it, you're never going to get an accurate or good enough sounding recording. Now, most people would mount the absorbers permanently to the wall, or like these foam pads, I have them glued permanently to the wall. For my bass trap panels, I decided to leave them loose, so they're all just stacked, kind of leaning against the wall, which is not ideal, but it allows me more flexibility, so they are movable and modular. Each panel, or each section, as you can see behind me there's 3 sections, so they can be broken apart and placed around the room in different ways when I'm actually recording. Because right now they're set up in a listening position style setup. So my listening position in the room now is as ideal as I need it for now. When I'm recording in the room, I can take these panels away from where they are and place them around the room, around the amps, around the musicians, and around the drum kit, in order to improve the recording for that situation. So it can be handy to have them modular and have, what was the word? Well, I suppose modular room acoustics, really, or changeable room acoustics. So you're not locked into one specific setup, basically. As far as price goes, the setup I have is probably the most cost-effective method, where you get rock wool and make a frame covered in fabric. If you want to go down the route of professionally made ones, you can buy pre-made broadband absorbers that you can glue to the walls that are made of foam. You can also buy very similar to this, where it would be some kind of insulation material covered in fabric, which can be mounted to the walls then. But for the sake of a day or two's DIY, this is really the best option. And they look a lot cooler, and it's something to be proud of. I mean, I'm not sure if I would completely recommend the t-shirt method for effectiveness or acoustic properties, but purely for looks, it really adds to the room. And part of a studio is the ambience you create. You want to be inspired by the room you're in and the instruments you're using and other equipment that you're using. So being surrounded by bands' logos that I like makes the room feel better, more creative, more home, more like home. Basically, see, that's a pun, it's awful. Bass traps are a good idea to build, they're easy to build. If you want to know how I built these, you can check out my video on them. If you're building your own recording room or music room, they are very handy to have. They're also, a lot of hi-fi nuts would also use bass traps to make their listening rooms more accurate, so they get a similar sound to how the mixing engineer would have heard the song when they were mixing it. So it's not just for recording, and as well, as I said, they're kind of decorative, so some people like to have them in the room for that purpose. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and check back soon for more videos, something involving recording music hopefully soon.